Officer Brennan grabbed Maya's arm and yanked her out of the car so hard her shoulder slammed against the doorframe. He threw her medical bag onto the wet asphalt, instruments scattering across the highway like broken glass. She screamed, "There is a woman dying! Let me go!" He shoved her against the hood, pinned her wrist behind her back, and pressed his full weight into her spine. "You're not going anywhere," he growled into her ear. 6 miles away, Elena Cross's heart had just stopped for the second time. The doctors were using their bare hands to keep her alive. And this man, this one man, had just decided his pride was worth more than her life. Before we go any further, if this story already has your blood boiling, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. It started the way so many terrible nights do, with a phone ringing at the worst possible moment. Dr. Maya Hartwell had been asleep for exactly 43 minutes when her cell phone lit up on the nightstand. She didn't groan. She didn't roll over and pretend she didn't hear it. She had trained herself years ago, back when she was a forward surgical team leader in Kandahar, to go from deep sleep to full alert in under 10 seconds. Her feet hit the floor before the second ring finished. "Hartwell," she said, her voice already clear. "Maya, it's Dr. Reyes. I need you in here now." The voice on the other end belonged to Carlos Reyes, the chief of cardiology at Riverside General. He was a calm man by nature, a man who had seen enough heart attacks and strokes and near-death moments to keep his voice level under almost any circumstance. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, there was a tremor underneath his words that Maya had never heard before. "Talk to me," she said, already moving toward the closet. 52-year-old female, came in 40 minutes ago presenting with crushing chest pain, diaphoresis, severe shortness of breath. EKG shows a massive STEMI, proximal LAD occlusion. We've got her stabilized for now, but her pressure keeps dropping. She's coded once already. Maya, she needs a bypass. Tonight. Right now. Maya pulled a shirt over her head and reached for her keys. "Who's the attending?" "Patterson, but his hands are shaking. He did a procedure this afternoon that didn't go well and Maya, he's not in a place to do this. You are the only one I trust with this case tonight." She was already in the hallway. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Make it 15, Carlos said. And then quietly, almost as an afterthought, he added, "She's important, Maya. I can't say more right now. But please, drive fast." Maya didn't ask what he meant. She grabbed her coat off the hook by the door, picked up her medical bag from the small table where she always left it, and stepped out into the night. The air outside was cold and heavy with the smell of rain that hadn't quite started falling yet. It was 12 minutes past midnight. The street outside her townhouse in Roanoke was completely empty. Not a single car, not a single light in any window. The whole world seemed to be sleeping except for her. And somewhere 6 miles away, a woman whose name she didn't yet know was fighting to keep her heart beating. Maya got in her car, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway. She merged onto I-77 and pressed the accelerator down hard. The speedometer climbed. 60, 70, 80. She kept her eyes on the road and her hands steady on the wheel. She had driven in worse conditions than this. She had driven military convoys through mountain passes in the dark, through roads that weren't really roads, with people bleeding in the seats beside her. A clean American highway in the middle of the night was nothing. She knew what she was doing. Her phone rang again. It was Carlos. "She coded again," he said without preamble. "We got her back, but Maya, her pressure is 40 over nothing. We are losing her." "How long can you hold her?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that doctors use when they don't want to say the truth out loud. 30 minutes, maybe less. "I'm 10 minutes out," Maya said. "Keep her alive." She ended the call and pushed the car to 95. The highway was empty. There were no other vehicles, no pedestrians, Nothing but black asphalt and white lines stretching out ahead of her in the dark. She had done the math in her head the way she always did. The distance, the time, the margin she had to work with. If she could get to the hospital in the next 9 minutes, scrub in within 5, have the patient open in another 10, there was a chance, a real chance. That was when she saw the lights, blue and red flashing in her rearview mirror, the distinctive wail of a siren cutting through the quiet night air. Maya's stomach dropped. She looked at her speedometer, 98 miles per hour. For exactly 1 second, she considered not stopping. Just for 1 second. The thought crossed her mind, and she dismissed it immediately. She knew that would only make things worse. She took her foot off the gas and guided the car to the shoulder, her hazards coming on automatically, her hands already reaching for her wallet and her hospital ID badge. She was going to explain. She was going to be calm and clear and professional, and the officer would understand, and she would be back on the road in 90 seconds. That was what she told herself as the cruiser pulled up behind her and the door opened. Officer Dale Brennan stepped out of the Virginia State Police cruiser with a particular kind of walk that certain men develop when they have had authority for a long time and have rarely had it questioned. He was 44 years old, broad-shouldered, and he had been on this particular stretch of I-77 for 11 years. He had pulled over hundreds of drivers. He had heard every excuse imaginable. His expression as he approached Maya's window was already set, already decided, before he had said a single word. Maya had her window down and her badge in her hand before he reached her. "Good evening, officer," she said. "I know I was speeding and I'm sorry, but I need you to listen to me. I am Dr. Maya Hartwell, trauma and cardiothoracic surgeon at Riverside General. I am on my way to perform emergency bypass surgery on a patient who has coded twice tonight. I have minutes to get there. Please." Brennan held up one hand. "License and registration." Maya blinked. "Did you hear what I said?" "I heard you. License and registration, ma'am." "Officer, a woman is dying, and I'm going to need your license and registration. Now." His voice hadn't changed, hadn't softened, hadn't given even a millimeter of ground. He looked at the badge in her outstretched hand, the way you might look at a flyer someone was handing out on a street corner, mildly, dismissively, with no intention of taking it. Maya took a breath. She reached into her wallet and handed him her driver's license. Then she reached into the glove compartment for her registration. Her phone rang. Brennan looked at it. "Don't answer that," he said. Maya looked at him. "That is my hospital. You can call them back after we're done here." After we're... She stopped herself. She answered the phone anyway. "Hartwell." Maya. It was a nurse she recognized. Rodriguez, the night charge nurse on the cardiac floor. Her voice was barely controlled. "She's going again. We're doing compressions. Carlos says you need to be here in 8 minutes or it's..." Brennan reached through the window and ended the call. Maya stared at him. For a moment, she could not find words. In her entire life, in Afghanistan, in trauma bays, in every high-pressure moment she had ever been in, she had never experienced anything quite like the white-hot fury that rose in her chest in that moment. But she pushed it down. She pushed it all the way down because she knew that losing her composure right now would cost her more time. "Officer," she said, and her voice was extraordinarily steady. "You just ended a call from a hospital where a patient is currently receiving CPR. I need you to understand what that means. That means her heart is not beating on its own. That means every second we stand here is a second closer to the moment when it cannot be restarted. I am asking you, as one professional to another, to let me go." Brennan had her license in his hand. He was looking at it. "Says here you live on Maple Grove Drive in Roanoke." "Yes." "Riverside General is 8 miles north. You came from the south." "I live in the south part of the city." "Uh-huh." He looked up at her. "You got anything in the car I should know about? Any weapons, any controlled substances?" Maya closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. I have a medical bag in the passenger seat with surgical tools and medications that are legally prescribed and properly labeled. I am a doctor. I am a surgeon. I have been a surgeon for 18 years. And before that, I was a United States Army combat surgeon for 6 years. And I have never in my life been arrested or cited for anything beyond a parking ticket. I am not a criminal. I am trying to save a life. Brennan walked around to the passenger side of the car and shone his flashlight through the window at the medical bag. Step out of the vehicle, please. Maya could not believe what she was hearing. I'm sorry? Step out of the vehicle. For what reason? I need to inspect that bag. She got out. She stood on the cold shoulder of I-77 at 12:18 in the morning, in her coat and her sneakers, and she watched Officer Dale Brennan open her passenger door and pull out her medical bag and set it on the hood of her car and start going through it. Her phone rang from inside the car. She could see the screen glowing through the windshield. Hospital, it said, again and again. Officer, please. Ma'am, I need you to stand back. Those are sterile instruments. If you contaminate them, stand back. Maya stood back. She pressed both hands against the side of her car and breathed through her nose and stared at the back of his head and thought about Elena Cross, whose name she still did not know, whose face she had never seen, whose heart was being beaten by human hands 6 miles away because her own would not beat by itself. Brennan was reading the label on a bottle of medication. He turned it over. He looked at it for a long time. Maya's phone stopped ringing. In the sudden silence, the only sounds were the distant hum of the highway and the wind and the crinkle of the paper wrapping on one of her sterile instruments that Brennan had now unfolded. Those are sterile, she said again, very quietly. He set it down on the hood. He pulled out another one. I trained for 6 years to be able to operate in any condition, Maya said, and there was something different in her voice now. Not anger, not pleading, just a kind of flat, terrible certainty. I have operated on soldiers who were still conscious on the table. I have operated in tents during sandstorms. I have operated with my bare hands when equipment failed. I have never lost a patient because I couldn't get to them in time. Tonight you are going to make me lose my first one, and I need you to understand that. I need you to look me in the eye and understand that what you are doing right now is going to kill someone. Brennan looked up at her. His expression had not changed. That's a serious accusation, he said. It is not an accusation. It is a fact. It is a medical fact. And when this is over, every person at that hospital who watched this woman die will know your name. Something flickered across his face then. Just for a moment, the smallest crack in the wall he had built around himself. But then it closed again. He reached back into the bag. I'm going to need you to stay calm, he said. Maya laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that comes out of a person when they have gone beyond the reach of ordinary emotion and arrived somewhere that has no name. She pressed her hand over her mouth and looked up at the sky, and for a moment she did not trust herself to speak. Her phone started ringing again. This time Brennan didn't reach for it. He just looked at it. Maya looked at him. Please, she said. Just that one word. No title, no credentials, no argument, just please. He didn't answer. She reached through the window and answered the phone herself. I'm here, she said. Maya, Carlos's voice, barely a whisper. She's been down for 4 minutes. We're still doing compressions. Her pupils are... He stopped. She heard voices in the background. Someone's shouting a number. Maya, where are you? I'm on I-77. I've been stopped by a state trooper. She said it clearly and directly, loudly enough for Brennan to hear every word. I am standing on the shoulder of the road, approximately 4 miles from the hospital, and I am being detained. The silence on Carlos's end lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then, give the phone to the officer. Maya held the phone out to Brennan. The chief of cardiology at Riverside General would like to speak with you. Brennan looked at the phone. For a long moment, he looked at it. Then he took it. He listened. Maya watched his face as he listened. She watched the way his jaw shifted, the way his eyes moved. She couldn't hear what Carlos was saying, but she watched Brennan's face, and what she saw was not what she had expected. He was not softening. He was not reconsidering. He was stiffening, actually, pulling himself up, settling more deeply into the fortress of his own certainty, the way some men do when they feel their authority is being challenged. "Sir," Brennan said, "with respect, I don't know who this woman is. She says she's a doctor. She's got a bag full of medical equipment that may or may not be legitimate. My job is to investigate." He stopped talking. Whatever Carlos had just said, it had landed differently than the rest. Brennan's eyes went to Maya for just a fraction of a second. Something moved through his expression, something that looked almost like uncertainty. But then he said, "I appreciate that, sir," in a tone that meant the opposite, and he handed the phone back to Maya. "We're almost done here," he told her. Maya put the phone back to her ear. "Carlos." "Listen to me very carefully," Carlos said, and his voice had changed completely. The warmth was gone. He sounded like someone speaking in code. In short, deliberate sentences, each word chosen with precision. "The patient's name is Elena Cross. Her husband's name is Vincent Cross. Vincent Cross is the chief of police for Roanoke County. He is currently at the hospital. He has been calling me every 2 minutes, asking why his wife is not yet in surgery. I have not told him about the traffic stop yet because I did not want to." He paused. "Maya, he is going to find out, and when he does, things are going to change very quickly." Maya lowered the phone slowly from her ear. She turned and looked at Officer Dale Brennan, who was now writing something on a notepad, and did not look up. Elena Cross, the wife of Chief Vincent Cross, the woman whose heart was being beaten by human hands 6 miles away, the woman for whom this officer, this one single, obstinate man, had chosen his suspicion over her life. Maya said nothing. There was nothing to say. She stood on the shoulder of the road in the cold, and she waited, and she looked out at the black highway stretching away to the north, toward the hospital, and she made herself breathe, and she made herself not think about the 4 minutes, the 5 minutes, the 6 minutes that were now gone and could never come back. Brennan tore the page from his notepad and held it out to her. A citation, $112 for excessive speed. Maya took it. She folded it once and put it in her pocket. "Am I free to go?" she asked. Brennan opened his mouth to answer. That was when the black SUV pulled up behind his cruiser, all 4 tires on the shoulder, the driver's door already opening before the vehicle had fully stopped. Chief Vincent Cross stepped out of the car. He was a large man, Chief Cross, 6'2", broad, with silver hair cut close to his head, and the bearing of a man who had spent 30 years in law enforcement. But what Maya noticed most was not his size or his bearing. What she noticed was his face. She had seen that face before. Not his face specifically, but that expression on it. She had seen it on soldiers in field hospitals who had arrived at the tent too late and already knew it. She had seen it on family members in waiting rooms when the surgeon came through the doors too slowly. It was the face of someone who understood, with complete and terrible clarity, that the world had just made a decision that could not be unmade. He looked at Maya. His eyes took in the medical bag on the hood of the car, the scattered instruments, the citation she had just put in her pocket. He looked at Brennan. "What in God's name," Chief Cross said, "is happening here?" It was not a question. It was the sound of a man trying very hard not to become something he could not take back. Brennan straightened. "Chief Cross, sir, this individual was traveling in excess of 90. "I know who she is," Cross said. His voice was very quiet. "I know exactly who she is. She is the surgeon who is supposed to be saving my wife's life right now." He took one step toward Brennan, and the officer held his ground, but just barely. Do you understand what is happening at that hospital tonight? Do you have any idea? Sir, with respect, I was doing my job. Your job. Cross said the two words the way you might say them if they had just been handed to you in a box, and you were examining them for the first time and finding them very small. Your job. He turned to Maya. Dr. Hartwell, I am so sorry. Please go. Right now, I will lead the way. Chief, Brennan said, I haven't finished. You are finished, Cross said and turned back to him. You are completely finished. We will discuss what that means tomorrow morning in my office. But right now I need you to get your vehicle out of the way and let this doctor through. There was a silence on that highway that seemed to last much longer than it actually did. The wind moved. A truck passed on the far lanes. Brennan looked at Cross, and Cross looked at him, and neither of them moved for what felt like a very long time. Then Brennan stepped back toward his cruiser. Maya was already in her car. She heard the engine turn over and felt the wheel in her hands and looked in the mirror at the red and blue lights still flashing uselessly in the night. And she pulled out onto I-77 and pressed the accelerator to the floor. Chief Cross's black SUV was in front of her, its own lights now on, cutting through the empty highway. She followed him. She followed him at 110 miles an hour, and she did not think about the citation in her pocket, or the look on Brennan's face, or the minutes that had been taken from her. She thought about Elena Cross. She thought about the angle of the incision, the temperature of the operating room, the weight of the scalpel in her hand. She thought about what she would do and how she would do it, and what came next and what came after that. She had 32 minutes of delay behind her. She could not get those back. What she had was every skill, every hour of training, every patient she had ever fought for and refused to lose. She had that, and right now it was going to have to be enough. The hospital lights appeared ahead in the dark, and Maya Hartwell pressed harder on the gas, and she drove. 12:31 a.m. Maya's hands were already moving before she was fully through the OR doors. She had bypassed the elevator, taken the stairwell at a dead run, and arrived on the third floor with her coat still on and her hair loose around her shoulders. A nurse named Tran met her in the corridor with a surgical gown and a look on her face that said everything without saying anything at all. How long has she been down? Maya asked, already pulling her arms through the gown. They got a rhythm back 4 minutes ago. Weak, irregular. Pressures 60/40. Tran was tying the gown at the back as Maya walked, both of them moving fast down the hallway. Dr. Reyes is in there. He hasn't left her side. Who else is in the room? Patterson stepped out. He said he couldn't. Tran hesitated. He just stepped out. Maya didn't judge that. She had seen what it did to a surgeon to stand at a table and feel helpless. She had felt it herself, once, in a field hospital outside of Kabul, when a soldier bled out before the supply convoy arrived. You didn't forget that feeling, and you couldn't always push through it on the other side. She understood Patterson, but she was not Patterson, and right now understanding him was a luxury she didn't have. She pushed through the OR doors. The room was tense in the specific way that hospital rooms get tense when everyone in them has been trying very hard for a very long time, and the margin for error has shrunk to almost nothing. The monitors were beeping in an unsteady rhythm. There were 4 nurses, an anesthesiologist named Dawson, who Maya trusted completely, and Carlos Reyes standing at the head of the table with his hands at his sides and his eyes on the door. On her, with an expression of pure, unfiltered relief that he immediately tried to compose into something more professional. He didn't quite manage it. Maya, he said. Tell me everything, she said, stepping up to the table. Elena Cross was a small woman. That was Maya's first impression, smaller than she had imagined somehow, lying there beneath the surgical draping with monitors attached to every available surface. Her face was pale in the way that faces get pale when the body has spent hours fighting desperately hard and is beginning to lose the argument. Her lips had a faint bluish tinge. Her chest rose and fell in the shallow, effortful rhythm of someone working very hard just to breathe. But she was breathing. Her heart was beating. She was still here. Carlos ran through the chart in under 90 seconds. Proximal LAD occlusion. 2 episodes of ventricular fibrillation. Current rhythm sinus with frequent PVCs. Blood pressure fragile. Ejection fraction, last measured 40 minutes ago, was down to 22%. She needs a bypass, Maya said. It wasn't a question. She needed it an hour ago, Carlos said quietly. Maya looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that an hour ago, Maya had been on the side of a highway with her wrist pinned behind her back and her medical bag scattered across the asphalt. That the 32 minutes she had lost on I-77 were 32 minutes that lived now inside this woman's body as damage, as scar tissue forming on a heart muscle that should have been protected. She pushed the thought away. Hard. "Let's go," she said. 12:38 a.m. The anesthesiologist had Elena under in less than 4 minutes. Maya scrubbed in at the sink, her eyes ahead, her mind already inside the procedure, visualizing each step the way she had trained herself to do, building the surgery in her head before her hands ever touched the patient. It was a technique she had developed in the Army, in the field, when the gap between arriving at a patient and beginning to operate was sometimes 30 seconds, and there was no margin for hesitation. Her hands, she noted, were completely steady. Nurse Tran tied her mask. "You good?" she asked quietly. "I'm good," Maya said. She wasn't entirely sure that was true. Somewhere underneath the discipline and the training and the absolute focus she was bringing to bear on the next several hours, there was a fury so vast and so cold that it scared her a little. Not because it was uncontrolled, she was controlling it, had it locked down tight, but because she could feel the edges of it. And she knew that when this was over, when Elena Cross was stable and the instruments were counted and the doors closed behind her, that fury was going to have somewhere to go. But not yet, not now. She walked back into the OR, 12:41 a.m. "Scalpel," Maya said, and the surgery began. Outside, in the corridor just beyond the OR waiting area, Chief Vincent Cross sat in a plastic chair with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. He was still in his coat. He hadn't taken it off since he'd arrived at the hospital 2 hours ago. His driver, a young officer named Kelsey, stood nearby and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Cross had been a cop for 30 years. He had sat across from people in the worst moments of their lives, people who had just lost children, parents, spouses. He had been trained to remain steady in the presence of grief, to be the calm thing in the room when everything else was chaos. He had never been on this side of it before. His phone buzzed. He looked at it without lifting his head. A text from his deputy chief, Marcus Webb. "Heard what happened on 77. Is it true?" Cross stared at the message for a long moment. Then he put the phone face down on his knee. Was it true? Was it true that a state police officer had physically restrained the surgeon who was supposed to be saving his wife's life and held her on the side of the highway for 32 minutes while Elena coded in a hospital room 6 miles away? Was it true that Cross himself had driven to the scene in his personal vehicle and stood on the shoulder of I-77 at 12:20 in the morning and looked at Officer Dale Brennan across the hood of a civilian car and understood, completely and without any ambiguity, that the man had had no idea at all, that the woman he was delaying was the only person standing between Elena Cross and the end of everything? Yes, it was true. Every single word of it. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and breathed. 1:07 a.m. Inside the OR, Maya was 45 minutes into the bypass, and something had gone wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, not yet, but she had felt it. A change in the tension of the tissue, a subtle shift in the way the heart was responding, and she had looked up at Dawson across the table and seen the same recognition in his eyes. "She's dropping," Dawson said quietly. "Pressure's falling." "I see it." Maya's hands kept moving, precise and unhurried in their rhythm, even as her mind accelerated. "Give me more volume. What's her hematocrit?" 28. "She's bleeding somewhere she shouldn't be." Maya adjusted her angle, changed the retraction, found it. A small vessel, a bleeder hiding behind the graft site. She could see it now. There, suction, now. The nurse suctioned. Maya cauterized. 20 seconds passed in the kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses against everyone in a room. Then Dawson said, "Pressure coming back up, 70/50. Maya let out a slow breath. "Good. Keep the volume going. Let's not celebrate yet." She kept her eyes on her hands and kept moving. Somewhere in the back of her mind, the part that never fully stopped calculating, she noted the time. 47 minutes in. If the rest of the procedure stayed clean, she had another hour and 20 minutes ahead of her. Maybe 90 minutes. Elena's heart had taken damage. She wouldn't know how much until she saw the finished repair. But it was still there, still beating under her hands, still fighting. That counted for something. That counted for a great deal. 1:19 a.m. In the corridor outside, a woman arrived that Vincent Cross had not expected to see. Her name was Lieutenant Sheila Morrow, and she worked internal affairs for the Virginia State Police. She was 40 years old, trim, with short-cropped hair and the kind of direct eye contact that had made more than one veteran officer uncomfortable in an interview room. She walked up to Cross without preamble and sat down in the chair beside him without being invited. "Chief Cross," she said, "I'm sorry about your wife. I genuinely am." Cross looked at her sideways. "You got here fast. I was already on it before you got off that highway." She folded her hands in her lap. "I need to ask you some questions about what you witnessed tonight." "Not tonight," Cross said. "Chief, my wife is in surgery." His voice was quiet and absolutely final. "Whatever you need from me, you will get it. But not tonight. Tonight you will wait." Morrow looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded, once, and sat back in her chair. She didn't leave. She just waited, the same as him, in the same plastic chair, in the same corridor, under the same humming hospital lights. They sat like that for a while without speaking. Then Cross said without looking at her, "He threw her bag on the ground." Morrow was still. She had her credentials in her hand when he walked up to the car. She was trying to show him, and he, Cross stopped, pressed his jaw together. He picked up her bag and he threw it on the ground. Morrow said nothing. She reached into her jacket pocket, took out a small recorder, set it on the arm of the chair between them, and pressed record. Cross looked at it, then he started talking. 1:44 a.m. Somewhere across town, Officer Dale Brennan was sitting at his kitchen table. He had been home for 40 minutes. He had driven home on autopilot, barely aware of the streets, barely aware of the lights changing or the turns he was making. He had walked into his house and taken off his hat and put it on the counter and stood there for a long time looking at nothing. His wife Donna was awake. She had heard his car in the driveway and come downstairs in her bathrobe to find him standing in the kitchen with his back to the door. "Dale?" she said. He turned around. She read his face the way she had been reading it for 19 years of marriage, and what she saw there made her come to him immediately, put her hand on his arm. "What happened?" she asked. He told her. All of it. The stop, the woman with the badge, the medical bag, the phone ringing and ringing, the hospital on the other end, the calls he hadn't taken, the calls he had ended. He told her about Cross arriving at the scene, about the look on Cross's face, about the drive home. He told it all in a flat, even voice, and Donna listened without interrupting. And when he was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dale, is the woman alive?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said finally. Donna looked at him. She was not a hard woman, and she loved her husband, and she had watched him be a good officer for almost 2 decades. But there were times, she could count them on one hand, when she had seen something in him that frightened her a little. A stubbornness that went past reason, a wall that went up when he felt challenged or doubted, and that would not come down no matter what was on the other side of it. Tonight, for the first time, she saw that wall from the outside, and it looked very different from out here than she imagined it looked from inside. "You need to call someone," she said. "A lawyer." Brennan looked at his hands. "I was doing my job," he said. It came out quieter than he intended, almost like a question. Donna sat down across from him at the table. "I know you think that," she said gently. "But Dale, baby, I need you to think about this very carefully, because I don't think everyone else is going to see it that way." 2:03 a.m. Maya stepped back from the table. It was done. She stood there for just a moment, her hands at her sides, looking at the monitors. The rhythm was steady. The pressure was holding at 94/62, which was not perfect, but was real, and it was sustaining itself, and it was Elena Cross's own heart doing it under its own power. The graft was solid. The repair was clean. "Good rhythm," Dawson said, and there was something in his voice, not quite a smile, but the sound of one. "Nice and steady." Maya looked at the clock on the wall. 2:03 in the morning. She had been in this room for an hour and 22 minutes. She had gone in 32 minutes late because of what had happened on I-77. She would spend a long time in the coming days wondering what those 32 minutes had cost. How much of the damage to Elena's heart was preventable? How much scar tissue would remain? How much of her function would be diminished by the delay? She would think about it. She would calculate it. She would sit with it in the particular way that surgeons sit with the things they cannot change. But right now, Elena Cross's heart was beating. It was beating on its own, steadily, persistently, with a stubbornness that Maya recognized because she had felt it in herself tonight. "Let's close," Maya said. The nurses moved. The instruments were counted. The room began the slow, careful process of unwinding from its intensity. Maya moved to the window of the OR doors and looked out into the corridor. She could see the waiting area from here. She could see Vincent Cross sitting in the plastic chair, still in his coat, still bent forward with his elbows on his knees. He hadn't moved. He was still there, still waiting, still holding on. She pushed through the doors. Cross was on his feet before she was fully through. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, and then he stopped just in front of her, and he looked at her face, and what he saw there made him exhale in a way that seemed to release something he had been holding for hours. "She's alive," Maya said. Cross put one hand over his mouth. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. His throat moved. "She's stable," Maya continued. "The repair is clean. Her rhythm is holding. She'll need monitoring for the next 48 hours, and there will be a recovery process. And I want to be honest with you. The delay tonight caused additional stress to the muscle that we would not have seen otherwise. But she is alive, and her heart is strong. She fought very hard tonight." Cross lowered his hand. His eyes were bright. "Can I see her?" "In about 30 minutes. Once she's in the recovery room and we have her settled." He nodded. He looked at Maya the way people sometimes look at each other after something enormous has happened, with a rawness, an openness that ordinary circumstances don't produce. "I don't know how to. I don't have words for." "You don't need words," Maya said. "Go sit down. I'll come get you when she's ready." She turned to go. "Dr. Hartwell." She stopped, turned back. Cross was looking at her with an expression she would remember for a long time. "What he did tonight," he said, and his voice had changed. The gratitude was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something that had been sharpening all night like a blade on a stone. "That officer, what he did to you on that highway, I want you to know that I will not let that stand, not as chief, not as her husband, not as a man who knows what tonight cost." Maya held his gaze. She thought about her wrist. She thought about her instruments scattered on wet asphalt. She thought about the phone ringing in her car while a man in a uniform read the label on a medication bottle. "I know you won't," she said, and she walked back toward the scrub room, and behind her she heard Vincent Cross sit back down in his chair. And for the first time all night, the sound of his breathing was something close to calm. 2:17 a.m. Lieutenant Morrow was still in the corridor when Maya passed through. She had her recorder in a notepad now, and she looked up when Maya came through. "Doctor," she said, "I know this is not the time, but I want you to know, whatever you saw tonight, whatever happened to you on that highway, I am going to need your account. Your complete account. Every minute." Maya stopped walking. She looked at Morrow for a long moment. "Is Brennan still on duty?" "He was sent home pending investigation. Has anyone looked at his dashcam footage?" Morrow's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "That is something we are actively pursuing." "Good," Maya said, "because every second of what he did is on that camera. Every call he ended, every instrument he touched." She paused. "My shoulder is bruised where he shoved me against the car door. I want that documented." Morrow wrote something on her notepad. "I'll arrange for a medical examination as soon as—" "I'm a surgeon," Maya said flatly. "I'll document it myself." She walked away. And Morrow watched her go with the careful, measuring look of a woman who had spent 20 years in law enforcement and understood, in the particular way that only experience can teach, when a situation had already grown larger than the people at the center of it. This was going to become something. She could feel it already, the weight of it, the momentum of it, building the way these things build. A woman detained on a highway, a patient who almost died, a chief of police sitting in a waiting room, a dash cam recording 32 minutes of footage that she already knew was going to be watched by a great many people in a very short amount of time. She clicked her recorder off, put her notepad away, and stood up from the plastic chair. Tomorrow, she thought, was going to be a very long day. But it had already started. In a recovery room at Riverside General, Elena Cross was breathing steadily under clean, white sheets, her heart doing the quiet, persistent, extraordinary work of being alive. And down a corridor, her husband was finally, for the first time in hours, able to sit in a chair and feel something other than terror. And somewhere across town, in a kitchen on a quiet street, Officer Dale Brennan sat across from his wife and stared at his hands and waited for a phone call he already knew was coming. The kind of call that changes the shape of a life. The kind that arrives in the small hours of the morning when the rest of the world is asleep and there is nowhere left to hide from what you have done. His phone rang at 2:23 a.m. It was his union rep. He answered it on the first ring. 2:23 a.m. The union rep's name was Gary Fitch, and he had been representing Virginia State police officers for 16 years. He had gotten people out of DUI accusations, excessive force complaints, wrongful termination hearings, and one very ugly incident involving a patrol car in a convenience store parking lot that nobody talked about anymore. He was good at his job, he was thorough, and he was fast, and he had a particular talent for making problems smaller than they actually were. But when Dale Brennan finished telling him what had happened on I-77, Gary Fitch went quiet in a way that he almost never did. "Gary," Brennan said, "you still there?" "I'm here." A pause. "Dale, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely straight with me. Did she show you her badge?" "She had something in her hand. Could have been anything. But she said she was a doctor." "People say a lot of things when they're trying to get out of a traffic stop." Another pause. Longer this time. "Okay, what about the phone calls? How many came in while you had her stopped?" Brennan thought about it. 4, maybe 5. "And you ended one of them." It was not a question. Brennan's jaw tightened. "She answered it while I was conducting an investigation. I was within my—" "Dale." Gary's voice was careful and deliberate, the way it got when he was choosing every single word. "I need you to understand something. The patient survived. I know that because I already made 3 calls before I called you, and that is the one piece of good news in this entire situation. But I need you to understand that the fact that she survived does not make what happened on that highway go away. Do you hear me? Brennan said nothing. The dash cam, Gary said. What's on it? The kitchen was very quiet. Donna was sitting across the table watching his face. Brennan looked at the wall. Everything, he said. Gary exhaled slowly. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You are not going to make any statements tonight. You are not going to call anyone. You are not going to answer any calls except from me. And you are absolutely not going to go anywhere near that hospital or that officer's family. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., you and I are going to sit down and we are going to go through every second of tonight before anyone else gets to it. Can you do that? Yeah, Brennan said. Dale. Gary paused. I've been doing this a long time, and I want to help you. I genuinely do. But I need you to be honest with me right now, right this second, while it's just the two of us. Did any part of you, at any point on that highway, believe she was telling the truth? The question hung in the air of the kitchen like smoke. Donna was watching him. He could feel her eyes without looking at her. Brennan put his free hand flat on the table. I didn't know, he said. That's not what I asked, Gary said. The silence lasted a very long time. Get some sleep, Gary said finally. 9 a.m., don't talk to anyone. The call ended. Brennan set the phone on the table. He did not look at his wife. He looked at his hand, flat on the table, and he thought about the label on the medication bottle, and he thought about the instruments scattered on the wet asphalt, and he thought about the way the phone had kept ringing and ringing in the dark. Donna reached across the table and put her hand over his. He didn't move. 3:15 a.m. Maya was still at the hospital. She had checked on Elena twice since the surgery ended, both times standing in the doorway of the recovery room with her arms folded, watching the monitors, watching the rhythm, watching the steady green line that meant Elena Cross was still on the right side of the night. The nurses had the situation handled. They didn't need Maya hovering, and she knew it. But she wasn't ready to leave yet. She wasn't sure she'd be able to sleep if she did. She was sitting in the small attending lounge off the second-floor corridor, a cup of coffee going cold on the table in front of her, when Carlos Reyes came in and sat down across from her. He looked like she felt, hollow around the eyes, the particular exhaustion of a person who has been operating on adrenaline for hours and can now feel the bottom of the tank. Her pressure's been holding steady at 98/64 for the last 40 minutes, he said. Rhythm is clean. Dawson thinks she's out of the woods. She is, Maya said, for now. Carlos was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I should have told you who the patient was when I called you tonight. Maya looked at him. Why didn't you? Because it shouldn't matter, he said. It shouldn't make any difference whose wife she is, and I didn't want you going into that surgery thinking about anything except the surgery. Maya picked up her coffee cup, looked at it, set it down. It wouldn't have mattered, she said. I would have driven just as fast regardless. I know that, Carlos said. That's why I called you. She looked at him. Carlos, what would have happened if I'd been 5 minutes later? 10. He didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. I've been doing that math in my head since I walked out of that OR, Maya said. Every version of it. What those 32 minutes cost her. What the tissue looks like that I couldn't get to in time. What her ejection fraction is going to be in 6 months compared to what it would have been. You can't do that to yourself. I'm not doing it to myself. I'm doing it so that I know exactly what to say when someone asks me. She looked at him steadily. And someone is going to ask me, you know that. Carlos leaned back in his chair. Lieutenant Morrow already came to see me, he said. About 45 minutes ago. She wanted the chart, the timeline, the call log, everything. Good, Maya said. She also told me the dash cam footage from Brennan's cruiser has been flagged for immediate review. He paused. Maya, I looked at the IA complaint file they opened tonight. You are listed as the primary complainant by default because you were the subject of the stop, but they're going to need a formal statement from you. I'll give them one, Maya said. I'll give them the most detailed, precise, medically documented statement they have ever received. Every timestamp, every call, every instrument he touched. She paused. He contaminated 2 of my instruments. Did I tell you that? He unwrapped them with his bare hands. Carlos stared at her. I used backups, she said. I always carry backups. But he contaminated them. His fingerprints are on sterile surgical instruments that were intended for a patient's chest cavity. She let that sit for a moment. I want that in the report. Carlos ran a hand over his face. God, Dale. His name shouldn't be Dale to you, Maya said, and there was something very quiet and very hard in her voice. His name is Officer Brennan. And what Officer Brennan did tonight was not a misunderstanding. It was not an error in judgment or an overreach or a lapse in procedure. He looked at me, a black woman in a car at midnight going 100 miles an hour, and he decided who I was before I opened my mouth. And nothing I said, nothing I showed him, nothing the hospital said to him on the phone changed that decision, because the decision had nothing to do with evidence. The lounge was very quiet. Carlos looked at her for a long moment. You knew that on the highway. I knew it the moment he looked at my badge, Maya said, the way he looked at it, like it was a prop, like it was something I had made in my garage. She shook her head slowly. I have been a surgeon for 18 years. I have my credentials laminated and current and visible. And he looked at them like they were a joke. She stood up, picked up the cold coffee, walked to the small window and stood there. I'm not going to let this be quiet, she said. I want you to know that. Whatever comes next, I am not going to let this be the kind of thing that gets investigated internally for 8 months and then results in a letter of reprimand and a 2-week suspension. She turned around. Elena Cross almost died on a table tonight because of 32 minutes that did not need to happen. And I am going to make sure that the people who need to know that know it. Carlos nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Your honest medical assessment of the impact of the delay on her prognosis, in writing, with your signature on it. You'll have it by morning, he said without hesitating. Maya looked at him, and for just a moment the hard edge in her expression softened into something more real, more tired, more human. Thank you, she said, for calling me tonight, for trusting me. There was no one else, Carlos said simply. There never was. 4:48 a.m. The dash cam footage went live at 4:48 in the morning, and no one meant for it to happen that way. The footage had been pulled by Lieutenant Morrow's team and flagged for internal review, which meant it was supposed to be secure, supposed to be locked inside the IA system, not accessible to anyone outside the investigation. What no one had anticipated was that a young officer named Terrell Banks, 26 years old, 3 years on the force, had been passing Brennan's cruiser when it was being processed back at the station, had seen the timestamp on the footage, had watched approximately 45 seconds of it on the processing computer before he understood what he was looking at, had taken out his personal phone and recorded those 45 seconds off the screen. He had not intended to post it. He had sent it to his girlfriend, a nursing student named Priya, with the message, "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." Priya had watched it 3 times. Then she had posted it to her social media with no caption other than a single word. Unbelievable. By 5:15 a.m., it had been shared 400 times. By 6 a.m., it had been shared 11,000 times. By 6:30, when the morning news producers in Richmond and D.C. were having their first editorial meetings of the day, it had been shared over 40,000 times, and 3 separate journalists had already called the Virginia State Police Public Affairs Office, which was not yet open, and left messages that ranged from urgent to frantic. The 45 seconds showed this. Officer Dale Brennan reaching through the window of a stopped vehicle and ending a call on the driver's phone, then pulling the driver, a woman, out of the car by her arm, then taking the bag from the passenger seat and dropping it on the hood with enough force that several items slid off onto the ground. Then standing over those items, reading labels, while the woman stood at the back of the car with her arms at her sides and her face toward the sky. 45 seconds. No sound, just the image. And yet somehow, without a single word of dialogue, anyone who watched it understood exactly what they were seeing. 5:52 a.m. Maya's phone woke her. She had fallen asleep on the couch in the attending lounge at some point around 4:30, still in her scrubs, her sneakers still on. She grabbed the phone on the first buzz and looked at the screen. It was a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, it rang again. Different number. She ignored it. Her notifications were loading now. The little number in the corner climbing past 10, past 20, still climbing. She sat up and rubbed her face and opened the first notification. Someone had tagged her in a post. She stared at the video for a long moment. She watched herself being pulled from the car. She watched her bag hit the hood. She watched herself standing at the back of the vehicle, looking up at the sky, doing the things she had trained herself to do in the worst moments. Breathing, staying controlled, keeping the fury locked away. And from the outside, from this angle, from 45 seconds of silent dashcam footage, it looked like something she hadn't fully let herself feel while it was happening. It looked like a woman being broken, piece by piece, on the side of a road, and choosing, with every piece, not to break. Her phone rang again. This time the name on the screen was one she recognized. Dr. Patricia Walsh, Chief of Medicine at Riverside General. Maya answered. Maya! Walsh's voice was alert and carefully controlled in the way of someone who has been awake for a while and is already managing several things simultaneously. I assume you've seen it. I just woke up, Maya said. I'm seeing it now. It's everywhere. CNN picked it up 20 minutes ago. I have 3 board members calling my personal cell. The hospital's public affairs team is drafting a statement as we speak. And before that statement goes out, I need to know. Walsh paused. Are you okay? It was such a simple question, such a direct human question, cutting straight through the institutional language and the board members and the PR statements and everything else. Maya was quiet for a moment. I'm okay, she said. Elena Cross is stable. The surgery went well. I know about Elena, Walsh said gently. I'm asking about you. Maya looked at the frozen image on her phone screen. Her own back, her own arms, her own silhouette standing in the dark. I'll be okay, she said. But Patricia, I need you to understand something. Whatever statement the hospital puts out today, it needs to be honest. It needs to say what actually happened and what it cost. Not careful language, not legally protective hedging. The truth. A beat. I agree, Walsh said. And the board agrees. Maya, I want you to know that this institution stands entirely and completely behind you. What happened last night was... She stopped. I don't have the right word for it. I do, Maya said, but I'll save it for the statement. 6:45 a.m. Vincent Cross had not slept. He had spent 2 hours in Elena's recovery room, sitting beside her bed, holding her hand while she slept under the gentle weight of the remaining anesthesia. He had watched her chest rise and fall. He had watched the monitor. He had talked to her quietly, just words, just his voice, the way he used to talk to her when she was sick with the flu and running a fever, and he would sit on the edge of the bed and tell her about his day, not because she was fully awake, but because he needed her to hear him, needed her to know he was there. He had told her everything that had happened tonight, all of it. He had told her about the call from Carlos, about driving to I-77, about standing on that highway and looking at Brennan across the hood of a car and feeling something he hadn't felt in 30 years of law enforcement, a rage so complete and so pure that it had frightened him. He told her about Maya walking into the OR without hesitation, without complaint, with 32 stolen minutes behind her and a patient on the edge of death in front of her. He told her about sitting in the plastic chair and waiting. Elena had not stirred, but once when he was talking, her hand had tightened briefly around his. He didn't know if it was conscious. He chose to believe it was. Now it was almost 7 in the morning, and a nurse had gently suggested he might want to get some rest, and he was standing in the corridor outside Elena's room, looking at his phone. The video had been forwarded to him by 6 different people in the last hour. He had watched it once and put the phone away. His deputy chief, Marcus Webb, was calling him now. "Chief," Webb said, "it's everywhere, every major network. The public affairs line is overwhelmed. We have reporters outside the hospital and outside the station and—" He paused. "Sir, there's something else. Brennan's union rep filed an emergency motion this morning to suppress the dashcam footage on the grounds that it was improperly disseminated." Cross went very still. "He did what?" "Filed it at 6:15 this morning. Fitch moved fast." "He can file whatever he wants," Cross said. "That footage is evidence in an open internal investigation, and it is not going anywhere." His voice was steady, but only barely. "Marcus, I want Brennan's full employment record on my desk by 8 a.m. Every complaint, every commendation, every incident report, everything." "Already pulling it," Webb said. "Chief, one more thing. The ACLU called." Cross closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Of course they did. "They want to speak with Dr. Hartwell. They've already been in contact with the hospital's legal team." "That is Dr. Hartwell's decision to make," Cross said. "Not mine, not the department's, hers." He paused. "Is there anything else?" "The governor's office called," Webb said quietly. "They want a briefing." Cross leaned against the wall of the corridor. He thought about 30 years of building something, 30 years of trying to make a department that people could trust, that the community could look at and believe in. He thought about all the cases, all the officers, all the small daily decisions that added up over time into something that was either integrity or the appearance of it. He thought about a woman's medical bag hitting the hood of a car in the dark. "Schedule it," he said. "I'll be there, 7:30 a.m. Maya was standing at the nurse's station on the 3rd floor when she felt a hand on her arm. She turned. It was a woman she didn't recognize. Mid-40s, red-eyed, still in yesterday's clothes, the particular dishevelment of someone who had spent the night in a waiting room. The woman looked at Maya's face, and then she seemed to lose whatever composure she had been holding on to, and her chin trembled. "You're Dr. Hartwell," she said. Maya looked at her. "I am. I'm Elena's sister, Diana." The woman pressed her hand over her mouth for a moment. "I've been here since midnight. I didn't know what was happening or if she was going to—" She stopped, drew a breath. "They told me this morning that you made it in time, that you were the one who—" She shook her head. "And then I saw the video. On my phone, I saw what happened to you on that highway." "Your sister is stable," Maya said. "She's resting. She's going to need time to recover, but she's strong, and the procedure went as well as it could have." "I know," Diana said. "They told me, but I came to find you because I—" She reached out and took Maya's hand in both of hers, and her grip was tight and trembling and real. "Thank you. I don't know what happened to you last night to get here. I don't know what that cost you, but I need you to know that I saw it. I see it." Maya looked at this woman, a stranger, bone-tired, wrung out with a night of fear, standing in a hospital corridor holding her hand. Something shifted in Maya's chest that had been locked tight since midnight. She did not cry. That was not who she was, and she knew herself well enough to know it. But she felt it, the enormousness of the night, the weight of what had been taken from her on that highway, and what she had chosen to do with what was left. She felt it move through her like a wave. "Thank you," Maya said. "That means more than you know." Diana nodded. She let go of Maya's hand and wiped her face and straightened up. She was steadier when she stood back. People often were, Maya had noticed, once they had said the thing they came to say. Maya watched her walk back down the corridor toward Elena's room. Then she turned back to the nurse's station, picked up the chart she had been reviewing, and kept working. Because there were other patients. There were always other patients. And the morning was here now, fully and completely, with all its noise and its demands and its relentless forward motion. The night was behind her. What it had cost, and what it was going to cost, and what she was going to do about all of it, that was in front of her, and she would face it the same way she had faced every other impossible thing in her life. Head up, eyes open, hands steady. The phone at the nurse's station rang. The nurse beside her answered it, listened, and turned to Maya. "It's a journalist," she said, "from the Washington Post. She says she has the full dash cam footage, not just the 45 seconds, the complete 32 minutes, and she wants a comment before they publish." Maya looked at the phone. "Tell her," Maya said quietly, "that I'll call her back in 10 minutes. She set down the chart. She walked to the window at the end of the corridor. She looked out at the morning, the gray early light, the parking lot below, the ordinary world going about its ordinary business. A city waking up to a story it didn't fully know yet. A story that started on a highway in the dark and ended, so far, with a woman breathing in a recovery room. So far. Maya took out her phone. She had 47 missed calls. She found the number she wanted and pressed dial. It rang twice. "ACLU, Virginia, this is Thomas Reed." "Mr. Reed," Maya said, "this is Dr. Maya Hartwell. I think it's time we talked." 7:41 a.m. Thomas Reed had been with the ACLU of Virginia for 11 years, and in that time he had taken calls from teachers, professors, ministers, veterans, and a sitting state senator who had been wrongfully arrested outside his own home. He thought he had developed a fairly reliable instinct for the shape a case would take from the very first conversation. Within 30 seconds of hearing a person's voice, he could usually tell whether what they had was a strong case or a sympathetic story, and he had learned the hard way that those two things were not always the same. Maya Hartwell's voice told him something different from both. She spoke for exactly 9 minutes without interruption. She gave him timestamps. She gave him medical terminology that he wrote down phonetically and would look up later. She described the physical contact, the grip on her arm, the shove against the doorframe, in precise clinical language that somehow made it more disturbing, not less, because there was no emotion layered over it, just fact after flat fact, delivered in a voice that was completely, deliberately controlled. She told him about the phone calls that had been ended, about the sterile instruments, about the 32 minutes. When she finished, Reed sat back in his chair and looked at the notes he had taken, which covered 2 full pages. "Dr. Hartwell," he said, "I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to take a moment before you answer." "Go ahead," she said. "In your professional opinion, and I understand you cannot give a definitive answer without a full medical analysis, but in your professional opinion, did the delay caused by Officer Brennan materially affect Elena Cross's surgical outcome?" A pause, not a long one. "Yes," Maya said. "The delay resulted in additional ischemic damage to the myocardial tissue that would not have occurred had I arrived on schedule. The precise long-term impact on her cardiac function will only be known over time, but the structural damage is documented in the surgical report, and it is directly attributable to the delay." Reed wrote that down very carefully. "And you're willing to say that under oath?" "I have operated under fire in a combat zone," Maya said. "I think I can manage a deposition." Reed almost smiled. "I'm going to need everything you described in a written declaration, signed, dated, witnessed. Can you do that today?" "I can do it within the hour," Maya said. "But Mr. Reed, I need to be clear about something. I am not calling you because I want a lawsuit. I am not primarily interested in money or a settlement. What I want is for what happened on that highway last night to become the kind of thing that changes something. Procedure, training, policy, something real that means the next doctor or the next teacher or the next person who is not a doctor and does not have the chief of police as a patient, that they don't stand on the side of a road in the dark and watch someone tell them their credentials are a joke. She paused. Can you help me with that? Reed was quiet for a moment. Dr. Hartwell, he said, that is exactly what we're here for. 8:15 a.m. The Washington Post ran the full story at 8:15 a.m. with the headline, Virginia surgeon detained during emergency, patient nearly dies. Full dash cam footage released. The journalist, a woman named Claire Okafor, who covered civil rights and law enforcement, had obtained the complete 32 minutes through a source she declined to name. The article was clean and precise and devastating. It did not editorialize beyond the facts because the facts did not require editorializing. It included the timestamp of each phone call from Riverside General. It included the timestamp of when Brennan ended the call. It included the timestamp of the physical contact. It included a statement from Riverside General's Chief of Medicine, Dr. Patricia Walsh, which said in part that the hospital fully supported Dr. Hartwell and that the delay had resulted in, quote, documented and measurable harm to the patient. It included a photograph of Maya, taken from her hospital bio page, in her white coat, looking directly at the camera with the particular steady expression of a person who knows exactly who they are. The Virginia State Police's public affairs statement, released 40 minutes earlier, described the incident as under active internal review and stated that Officer Brennan had been placed on administrative leave. It did not use the word apology. It did not use the word wrong. It said that the department takes all concerns seriously and is committed to thorough and transparent review of all officer conduct. By 9 a.m., the article had been read 1.2 million times. By 9:30, it had been read 3.4 million times. By 10 o'clock, every television in the Riverside General waiting room was showing the same 45-second clip, and nurses and orderlies were gathering in small groups in corridors and break rooms and watching it on their phones and saying things to each other in low voices. 9:03 a.m., Chief Vincent Cross walked into the Internal Affairs Division of Roanoke County Police Department and sat down across from Lieutenant Sheila Morrow and placed his hands flat on the table. "Tell me everything you have," he said. Morrow had been there since 6 that morning. She had 3 monitors running and a legal pad covered in notes and the particular alert exhaustion of someone who had not slept but was running on the specific fuel of a case that matters. She looked at Cross and understood, from the way he sat, from the set of his jaw, that he was not here as Elena's husband. He had put that away for this room. He was here as chief. She respected that. She started talking. The dashcam footage, full 32 minutes, had been reviewed by her team overnight. She walked him through it minute by minute. At the 2-minute mark, Brennan could clearly be seen examining Maya's badge and setting it aside without comment. At the 4-minute mark, the phone visible through Maya's windshield showed an incoming call from Riverside General. At the 4-minute 17-second mark, Brennan reached through the window and ended it. At the 7-minute mark, he removed her bag from the car. At 9 minutes and 40 seconds, the physical contact, grip, pull, shove. Cross listened to all of it without expression. "What about his prior record?" Cross said. Morrow slid a folder across the table. Cross opened it. Inside were 4 prior complaints filed against Brennan over 11 years. 2 dismissed for insufficient evidence. 1 resulted in a written reprimand. A 2019 incident involving an extended traffic stop of a black motorist who had filed a complaint citing racial bias. The reprimand was 2 paragraphs and had no apparent effect on Brennan's career trajectory or assignments. Cross looked at the 2019 reprimand for a long time. "Who signed this?" he said. Morrow pointed to the signature at the bottom. It was his predecessor, the previous chief of police, retired now in Florida. Cross closed the folder. "What are you recommending?" "Termination," Morrow said, without hesitation, "and referral to the Commonwealth's attorney for criminal consideration. Obstruction, potentially reckless endangerment." She paused. "The ACLU called this morning. They have Dr. Hartwell as a client as of 45 minutes ago." "I know," Cross said. "The governor's office briefing is at 2 p.m. "I know that too." He stood up. "Sheila, I want this process to be by the book. Every step documented, every decision justified. I don't want Brennan's attorneys to find a single procedural crack they can use to slow this down or muddy it. Can you give me that?" "That's what I've been here since 6 a.m. for," she said. Cross looked at her. For just a moment, something broke through the professional surface of his expression. Something tired. Something that had been through a night he would spend a very long time trying to put down. "Thank you," he said, "for moving fast." "I have a daughter who's a nurse," Morrow said simply. Moved fast seemed appropriate. 9:47 a.m. Gary Fitch arrived at Dale Brennan's house at precisely 9:47, 14 minutes late for their 9 a.m. meeting, which told Brennan something about how the morning had gone before Gary had even gotten out of his car. Fitch sat down at the kitchen table, set his briefcase down, and opened it without preamble. He looked like a man who had been making calls since before dawn, which he had. He looked like a man who had been watching the news with growing dread, which he also had. Donna brought coffee. Fitch accepted it with a brief, distracted thank you, and looked at Brennan. "The suppression motion was denied," he said. Brennan stared at him. "Already?" The judge looked at it for about 20 minutes and threw it out. The footage was flagged for IA review, not sealed. There was no legal basis to suppress. Fitch took a sip of coffee. "Dale, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me. The situation this morning is significantly different from the situation I thought we were dealing with last night." "How different?" "The article in the Post has been read 3 million times. The governor's office is involved. The ACLU has Hartwell as a client." He paused. "And there is something I did not know last night that changes the calculation substantially." He looked at Brennan steadily. "Dr. Maya Hartwell is not just a trauma surgeon. She served 6 years as a combat surgeon in the United States Army. She has a Silver Star. She has 2 Bronze Stars. She was nominated for a commendation by the commander of the surgical unit she ran in Afghanistan." He set his coffee down. "She is, by any measure, one of the most credentialed and decorated surgeons in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And you told the hospital's chief of cardiology, when he called to vouch for her, that you weren't interested." Brennan was quiet. "There is a recording," Fitch said. "The hospital logs all administrative calls. That call between you and Dr. Reyes is on record. In it you use the phrase, 'With respect, I don't know who this woman is.' Those are your exact words, Dale. After the chief of cardiology of a major hospital called your personal cruiser phone to confirm that a surgeon he sent for was standing on the highway." Fitch folded his hands on the table. "The Commonwealth's attorney's office called me at 7 this morning. They are looking at this." Donna from the counter made a small sound that wasn't quite a word. Brennan looked at the table. His face had been doing something all morning that he didn't have the vocabulary for. A slow, grinding internal process that was not yet remorse and not yet understanding, but was moving toward one of them, or possibly both, in the particular painful way of a person who has built a wall for a long time and is now feeling the foundation of its shift. "I thought she was lying," he said. "I know," Fitch said. "I've had people fake credentials before. I've had people—" "Dale." Fitch's voice was quiet and flat and final. "I know, and in a different situation, on a different night, with a different person, maybe that caution would have been the right call. But it wasn't the right call last night, and we both know why it wasn't. And the question in front of us now is what you do about that." Brennan looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the difference between a man who made a terrible mistake and a man who committed an act of deliberate racial bias is going to be decided, in large part, by what you do next." Fitch leaned forward. "There is a woman in a recovery room at Riverside General right now. There is a surgeon who went home this morning with a bruised shoulder and 47 missed calls. And there is 32 minutes of dashcam footage that the entire country has seen." He paused. "So I am asking you, Dale, not as your union rep, as the person across the table from you right now, what do you want to do?" The kitchen was very quiet. Donna had turned around from the counter and was watching her husband. She was not going to speak. She had learned years ago that there were moments when speaking would prevent the thing that needed to happen, and this was one of them. Brennan pressed both hands flat on the table. His jaw worked. He looked out the window. He looked back at his hands. "I want to talk to her," he said. Fitch blinked. "To Hartwell?" "Yes." "Dale, that is not—" "I know it's not advisable. I know what it looks like. I don't care." He looked at Fitch directly for the first time that morning. "I looked her in the face on that highway, and I decided who she was without listening to a word she said. And then I watched her get in her car and drive to the hospital and save the life of a woman who almost died because of what I did." He stopped. His voice had thinned out. "I'm not asking for absolution. I'm not asking her to forgive me. I just want to look her in the eye and say what I did was wrong. Face to face. Like a man." He paused. "Everything else after that, the investigation, the charges, whatever happens, I'll take it. But I need to do this first." Fitch looked at him for a long moment. Then he sat back. "I'll reach out to her attorney," he said. "It's their call, not mine." 11:20 a.m. Maya was in her office when Thomas Reed called to tell her about Brennan's request. She had been sitting at her desk for the first time since the previous afternoon, working through patient files with the focused efficiency of someone who was not yet willing to stop moving. Her shoulder ached. She had photographed the bruise herself that morning in the hospital bathroom, documented it on her phone, sent copies to Reed, to the hospital's legal team, tomorrow. She had written and signed the declaration for the ACLU in under 40 minutes. She listened to Reed explain the request without interrupting. When he finished, she said, "What's your recommendation?" "Strategically? No. It gives him a narrative. It lets him humanize himself before the proceedings begin. It could muddy the public perception of the case at a moment when public perception is currently entirely in your favor." "That's the strategic answer," Maya said. "What do you think as a person?" Reed was quiet for a moment. "I think you've earned the right to say no," he said. "And I also think that if you decide to say yes, it won't weaken anything. Because what happened on that highway doesn't change based on whether he apologizes for it." Maya looked at the window. She thought about Brennan's face in the dark, the way he had looked at her badge, the way he had reached through her window and ended the call without hesitation, without doubt, without a single flicker of uncertainty about whether what he was doing was right. She thought about what it must have cost him this morning to ask. "Tell them yes," she said, "but not today, tomorrow, at the hospital, on my terms." Reed paused. "Any specific conditions?" "No lawyers in the room," she said. "Just him and me." 1:58 p.m. The governor's briefing lasted 40 minutes, and by the time Cross walked out of it, 3 things had been decided. First, an independent review panel would be established to examine the Virginia State Police's traffic stop protocols, with a specific focus on discretionary detention practices. Second, the State Attorney General's office would formally monitor the Brennan investigation to ensure independence. Third, the governor himself would make a public statement before the end of the business day. Cross drove back to the hospital afterward. He did not go straight to Elena's room. He stopped first in the corridor outside the cardiac floor and stood there for a moment with his phone in his hand, looking at the text from Marcus Webb that said simply, Brennan's rep requested contact with Hartwell. She agreed. Tomorrow. He read it twice, then he put the phone in his pocket and walked to Elena's room. She was awake. That was the thing he had been waiting for since midnight, and it arrived with such quiet ordinariness. He pushed open the door, and she was awake, her eyes open, her head turned toward him, her expression soft and tired, and entirely, completely herself, that he had to stop in the doorway for a moment and just stand there. "Hey," she said. Her voice was rough from the intubation, barely above a whisper. "Hey," he said back. He came to the chair beside her bed and sat down and took her hand. "How bad?" she asked. "You're going to be fine," he said. She looked at him with the particular look of a woman who had been married to a cop for 26 years and could read the difference between what he said and what he meant. "Vincent, how bad?" "It was close," he said. "It was very close. But you're here. You're stable. The surgeon—" He stopped, swallowed. The surgeon was extraordinary. Elena watched his face. She had known him long enough to know when he was carrying something, and she could see it in him now. The weight of the night, the hours in the plastic chair, the thing on the highway that he hadn't told her yet. "What happened?" she said. He told her. Not all of it, not the detail about the bruise or the scattered instruments, but the shape of it, the stop, the delay, the minutes, the highway. When he finished, Elena was quiet for a moment. Her hand tightened around his. "Is she okay?" she asked. Not, "What about Brennan?" Not, "What are you going to do?" Not, "What does this mean?" The first thing out of her mouth was, "Is the doctor okay?" Cross looked at his wife, felt something loosen in his chest that had been knotted tight since midnight. "She's okay," he said. "She's more than okay." Elena nodded. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, her expression had settled into something resolved, the way it got when she had made a decision. "I want to meet her," she said. "You will," Cross said, "when you're stronger. I want to thank her properly. Not a card, not a phone call. I want to look her in the eye." She paused. "She deserves that." "She does," Cross agreed. Elena turned her head slightly and looked at him. "And the officer." Cross met her gaze. "Whatever happens to him," Elena said carefully, "make sure it's right. Not just punishment. Right." She held his eyes. "You know the difference." He did know the difference. He had spent his entire career trying to live inside it. The space between punishment and justice was not always wide, but it was always real, and it always mattered. "I know," he said. 3:30 p.m. The governor's statement went out at 3:30. It was 4 paragraphs long. It named Maya by name. It described what happened as an unconscionable failure and called for the independent review. It did not name Brennan, but it did not need to. By 4 p.m., the statement had been shared 200,000 times. By 4:15, the hashtag that had started from Priya's single-word caption that morning was the top trending topic in the United States. By 5 p.m., Dr. Maya Hartwell's hospital bio page had received so many visits that the hospital's server briefly crashed. When it came back up, the bio was accompanied by a short, official statement from Maya herself, which said this: "What happened to me on the highway last night was not an isolated incident. It was the result of a bias so deeply embedded in the fabric of how some people wield authority that it operated automatically, without thought, against all evidence. I am a surgeon. I was trained by the United States Army. I have spent 18 years saving lives. None of that mattered to the officer who stopped me. What mattered to him was a decision he made in the first second he saw my face. I am speaking publicly not because I want attention, but because there are people who experience what I experienced last night who do not have the platform I now have, who do not have the chief of police arriving at the scene, who do not have their story go viral, who simply lose the 32 minutes and go home and absorb it and say nothing because they have learned that nothing will change. I am speaking for them. Carlos Reyes read the statement on his phone in the hospital break room and sat very still for a moment. Then he forwarded it to every physician in his contact list with no additional message. Within the hospital, people read it in corridors and waiting rooms and nursing stations. An orderly named Jerome, who had been at the hospital for 22 years and had his own stories that he had never told anyone and never intended to, read it twice in the supply closet where he had gone to be alone for a moment, and then he sat down on a low shelf and looked at his hands for a while. 5:55 p.m. Maya's last patient of the day was a 61-year-old man named Howard Briggs, who had come in for a post-operative follow-up. He had had a valve replacement 6 weeks earlier, performed by Maya, and he was recovering well. His color was good, his rhythm was normal, and he was already talking about going back to his garden. He came in with his wife, a cheerful woman named Patrice, who brought cookies for the nursing staff every time she visited. They sat across from Maya in the consultation room, and Howard did what he always did. He asked detailed questions and wrote the answers in a small notebook. Patrice held his hand and watched Maya's face while she talked. At the end of the appointment, as Maya was making notes in the chart, Patrice said, "We saw the news today, doctor." Maya looked up. Patrice's expression was warm and serious at the same time. "We just wanted you to know," she said, "that when Howard had his surgery, when I was sitting in that waiting room and they came out and told me it went well, I thought about you, the person responsible. And I thought, whoever this person is, whatever they went through to become who they are, they matter. What they do matters." She paused. "I thought you should hear that today of all days." Howard was nodding. He patted his wife's hand and then looked at Maya. "You saved my life," he said simply. "And then you went and saved someone else's when a man with a badge tried to stop you." He shook his head slowly. "That's something." Maya looked at these two people across the small table. Two ordinary people, unremarkable by any external measure, offering her the most uncomplicated and unconditional kindness she had received all day. More than the calls from the governor's office, more than the legal strategies, more than the viral numbers. Just two people who saw her. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady. "Thank you both." She watched them leave. She sat in the consultation room for a moment after the door closed, her hands folded on the desk, breathing slowly. Tomorrow she would sit across from Dale Brennan in a hospital room. Tomorrow there would be depositions and review panels and attorney calls and press inquiries. Tomorrow Elena Cross might be strong enough to be moved from recovery to a regular room. Tomorrow was going to be full and loud and hard. But tonight, for just this moment, she let herself feel all of it. The bruise on her shoulder, the 47 missed calls, the cold coffee at 3 in the morning, the weight of a woman's heartbeat under her hands in the dark. She had been doing this for 18 years. She had run into burning buildings in the metaphorical sense for 18 years and never once been thanked for the running itself, only for what she brought back. Last night a man had tried to stop her. He had used his body and his badge and his certainty about who she was, and he had tried to plant himself between her and the person she was going to save. And she had saved her anyway. Maya Hartwell uncapped her pen, pulled Howard Briggs's chart toward her, and went back to work. 8 a.m. Maya arrived at the hospital 40 minutes before the meeting. She had slept 6 hours, the most she had gotten in 2 days, and she had woken up with the particular clarity that sometimes follows real exhaustion, the kind where the mind has had time to settle everything into its correct order. She showered. She dressed carefully. She chose her white coat deliberately, the one with her name and credentials embroidered on the left chest pocket, and she put it on the way she always put it on, right arm first, then left. Then she straightened the collar and looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 1 second. She was ready. Thomas Reed had called her at 7:15 to confirm the meeting and to remind her, one final time, that she had every right to cancel. She had thanked him and told him she'd see him afterward. Carlos had texted her at 7:42 with nothing but a single line. "I'll be in my office if you need me." She had texted back a thumbs up, which was not her most eloquent moment, but it was honest. She checked on Elena first. Elena Cross was in room 318 now, moved up from recovery late the previous evening. Her color was better. Her voice was stronger. When Maya came through the door, Elena was sitting up slightly in the bed, her silver hair brushed back, her eyes alert and tracking. There was a quality to the way she looked at Maya that made the room feel smaller, more intimate. The look of a person who understood, in the cellular, unambiguous way that near-death produces, exactly what the woman standing in her doorway had done for her. "Good morning," Maya said. She picked up the chart from the foot of the bed, scanned it quickly. Rhythm, stable. Pressure holding. Fluid balance, good. She said it back. "Good morning," Elena said. Her voice was still slightly rough, but warmer than yesterday. "How are you?" "I'm good," Maya said. "No," Elena shook her head gently. "I'm not asking the doctor version of that question. I'm asking the real one." Maya looked at her. A woman she had never met before 2 nights ago, whose heart she had held in her hands in the dark, asking her the real version of the question. She considered deflecting. She was very good at deflecting. She had been deflecting personal questions for the better part of 18 years. "I'm nervous," she said, which was the truth and surprised her a little to say out loud. Elena nodded like that was exactly the right answer. "He called Vincent last night," she said. "Brennan, not through a lawyer. He called Vincent directly and asked if he could speak to me." She paused. "Vincent almost didn't tell him the right room number." Maya almost smiled at that. "What did you tell Vincent?" "I told him to give Brennan the number," Elena said, "and then I told Brennan I wasn't the person he needed to talk to." She looked at Maya steadily. "You are." They looked at each other across the clean hospital room, 2 women on opposite sides of the same night, and something passed between them that did not require words and would not have been improved by them. "I'll come back after," Maya said. "I'll be here," Elena said. 8:43 a.m. The room Maya had chosen for the meeting was a small consultation room on the 2nd floor, neutral ground, away from the cardiac wing, away from the OR, away from anywhere that carried too much weight in either direction. She had asked for 2 chairs and a small table, and nothing else. No flowers, no water pitchers, no framed art on the walls, just the space itself. She was sitting in one of the chairs when the door opened. Dale Brennan looked like a man who had aged 4 years in 48 hours. He was out of uniform, khaki pants, a blue button-down shirt, his hands at his sides, and without the uniform he looked smaller somehow, or maybe just more accurately sized. He was still broad and still physically imposing, but the authority that the uniform carried was gone, and what was left underneath was just a man in his mid-40s who had not slept and whose face showed every hour of it. He stopped just inside the door. His eyes found Maya and stayed there. There was no lawyer with him. He had honored that condition. "Dr. Hartwell," he said. "Sit down," Maya said. He sat. He placed his hands on the table in front of him in a deliberate gesture, the way a person does when they want to show they are not hiding anything. He looked at her, and she looked back, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Brennan said, "I practiced what I was going to say in the car on the way here. I had it all worked out." He stopped. "It sounded wrong every time." "Then don't say the practice version," Maya said. He nodded slowly. He looked at the table. Then he looked back up. "I made a decision about you before I reached your window," he said. "I know that. I knew it that night somewhere. I knew it and I didn't examine it because examining it would have meant slowing down. And slowing down felt like losing control of the situation." He paused. "That is the most honest I can be about what was happening in my head." Maya said nothing. She was watching him the way she watched a patient presenting symptoms. Not with judgment, but with the particular focused attention of someone cataloging what was real. "I ended the call from your hospital," Brennan said, and his jaw tightened on the words. I have been thinking about that moment specifically since 2 in the morning 2 nights ago. Because everything else, the stop, the bag, all of it, I can tell myself stories about procedure and protocol. But that moment, I reached through your window and I ended that call. And there is no story I can tell myself about that. He looked at her directly. A woman was on the phone telling you her patient was dying, and I ended it. The room was absolutely still. You were right about something you said on the highway, Brennan continued, and his voice had roughened. You said that what I was doing was going to kill someone. You said it clearly, to my face, and I heard it and I kept going. He pressed his hands flat on the table. Elena Cross is alive because you are better at your job than I was at mine that night. Not because of anything I did, despite what I did. Maya let the words settle. She had imagined this moment many times in the past 48 hours, had run different versions of it, had scripted her responses, had prepared herself for minimization, for deflection, for the lawyerly half apology that admits nothing. She had not prepared herself for this, for the specific, undefended truth of it. Do you know what the hardest part was? She said. It wasn't the bag. It wasn't the shove. It wasn't the 32 minutes. She paused. It was the phone calls. Watching my phone light up in the car, knowing who was on the other end, knowing what they were calling to tell me, and watching you ignore them. Because in that moment, every call you let ring was a decision. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a lapse. Every time that phone lit up, you made a choice. Brennan didn't look away. I know. I need you to know something else, Maya said. I don't know the full extent of the damage to Elena's heart yet. We will not know for months what her ejection fraction looks like at the 6-month mark, what her quality of life looks like at the 1-year mark. Those are open questions, and the answers to those questions were shaped by the time you took from me on that highway. She let that land. I am not telling you that to be cruel. I am telling you because I think you need to hold the full weight of it. Not just what happened, but what might still be happening in her body because of that night. Brennan's face contracted. His eyes went bright for a moment, and he pressed his lips together hard, and she watched him absorb it. The full, unflinching truth of consequence, the kind that doesn't resolve neatly and doesn't go away. What do you need from me? He said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Whatever is in my power, whatever would actually help, not for my case, not for my record. What do you need? Maya looked at him for a long moment. Testimony, she said. When the independent review panel convenes, I want you to sit in front of them and tell them exactly what you told me just now. Not the legal version, this version. I want you to tell them about the decision you made before you reached my window. I want you to tell them about the phone calls. She paused. Because the panel is going to look at protocol and procedure and training, and all of that matters. But what they also need to hear is what was happening inside the mind of the officer making those decisions. What the bias actually feels like from the inside. What it sounds like when it justifies itself in real time. Brennan stared at her. You know what that does to my case. Yes, Maya said. Gary will, my union rep will. I know, Maya said. That's your decision to make. I'm telling you what would actually change something. She looked at him steadily. You asked me what I need. That's what I need. Not your apology, your truth. In public, on record, where it can do something. The consultation room held them both in silence for a long moment. Then Brennan said, very quietly, Okay. Maya looked at him. Okay? I'll testify, he said, the way you described, all of it. She nodded once. She stood up. He stood too, reflexively. They were both standing in a small room, and there was nothing left to say in it. And the air between them held everything that the past 48 hours had built. The highway, the phone calls, the surgery, the video, the wait of 32 minutes. And it did not dissolve. It did not disappear, but it had become something that both of them now carried with their eyes open. which was the only honest way to carry it. Maya picked up her coat from the back of the chair. "One more thing," Brennan said. She looked at him. "Your credentials," he said. "Your badge on the highway. I looked at it like it was nothing." He paused. "I want you to know that I saw it. I saw exactly what it was, and I made the choice anyway." He stopped. "I think you deserve to know that it was a choice, not a mistake, a choice, and I made the wrong one." Maya held his gaze for 3 full seconds, the acknowledgement she had wanted from the moment he had set her badge aside on that highway and gone back to his notepad. The one thing none of the public statements or legal proceedings or viral videos could give her. The simple, private, human acknowledgement from the person who had done it that he had known exactly what he was doing. "Thank you," she said, "for that." She walked out. 10:15 a.m. Thomas Reed was waiting in the corridor. He took one look at her face and said, "How did it go?" "He'll testify to the panel," Maya said, walking past him toward the elevator. "Full account, no filters." Reed fell into step beside her, processing that. "His union rep is going to have a stroke." "Probably," Maya said. "That's between them." "Maya, that testimony, if he actually delivers what you're describing, it changes the entire framing of the panel's recommendations. It goes from procedural review to something that can actually inform policy at a state level." "I know," Maya said. "That's why I asked for it." Reed looked at her with the expression of a man who had underestimated someone and was honest enough to know it. "You walked into that room to get something specific." "I walked into that room to look him in the eye," Maya said. The rest of it followed. She pressed the elevator button. "Set up the press conference for 2 p.m. I'll give the full statement then." 11:30 a.m. The press conference was held in the hospital's main conference room, and it was standing room only by 11:45, 45 minutes before it was scheduled to start. Reporters from every major network, 3 national newspapers, 2 Virginia state outlets, and a woman from a medical ethics journal who had driven up from Richmond that morning. Camera operators lined the back wall. The hospital's public affairs team stood to the side with the controlled expressions of people managing something significantly larger than they had anticipated. Chief Vincent Cross sat in the second row. He was in uniform. He had chosen that deliberately. The same uniform, the same badge, the same institution that Dale Brennan had represented on I-77. He sat there in it as a statement, as a reckoning, as a man who understood that leadership meant showing up in the hardest rooms and not pretending the institution was separate from its failures. Carlos Reyes sat beside him, and beside Carlos, in a chair that had been quietly arranged by a nurse named Tran, who had understood without being asked, sat Elena Cross. She had been cleared for limited movement that morning. She had insisted on coming. Vincent had tried, briefly, to talk her out of it, and she had looked at him with a calm so absolute that he had stopped talking mid-sentence and gone to find her a wheelchair. She was not in the wheelchair now. She was sitting in a chair under her own power, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, wearing the light blue cardigan that Vincent had brought from home because she had asked for it specifically. At precisely 2 p.m., Maya Hartwell walked into the room. The sound changed when she entered. It was subtle, not silence, but a shift in the quality of the noise. A collective intake, a reorientation of attention that happens when a room full of people who have been looking at a photograph finally see the real thing. Maya walked to the podium in her white coat and her credentials, in her steady, unhurried way, and she stood there for a moment and looked at the room. Her eyes found Elena. Elena gave her a small, deliberate nod. Maya looked at the cameras. She took a breath, and she began. She spoke for 22 minutes without notes. She described the night from the beginning, the call, the drive, the lights in the rearview mirror. She described every minute of the stop with the same precision she had given Reed in their first call, but with something added now, something that the legal declaration had not contained. the interior experience of it, the thing that was happening inside her while it happened on the outside. The fury she had locked away, the calculations she had kept making, the way she had stood at the back of her car and looked up at the sky and made herself breathe because losing control would have cost her more time, and she could not afford more time. She talked about Elena without using her name. She talked about a patient who had coded twice and whose heart was being beaten by human hands while she stood on a highway holding a citation for $112. She talked about the call that had been ended. She held on that for a moment, let the room sit in the specific horror of it. A surgeon, a dying patient, a ringing phone, a hand reaching through a window. She talked about arriving at the hospital. She talked about the surgery. She talked, carefully and precisely, about the damage that 32 minutes had produced in the cardiac tissue of a woman who deserved better. And then she said this: I want to be very clear about what I am asking for today. I am not asking for Officer Brennan to be destroyed. I am not asking for vengeance. I am asking for honesty. I am asking every law enforcement agency in this state, in this country, to look at what happened on that highway and ask themselves, what in our culture, in our training, in our daily practice, produced a man who could look at a decorated surgeon's credentials and decide they were fake? What produced a man who could listen to a hospital's chief of cardiology on the phone and choose not to believe him? What are we building day after day that makes that kind of certainty possible? And then I want them to take their honest answer to that question and do something real with it. Not a memo, not a training module, something structural, something that changes the conditions that made that night possible. She paused. I am alive. I am uninjured beyond a bruise that has already faded. My patient is alive and recovering. By the measure of that night, we were lucky. But luck is not a system. And the next person standing on the side of a highway at midnight, showing their credentials to someone who has already made up their mind, they may not be as lucky. I am speaking today so that we stop depending on luck. The room was completely silent. Then it wasn't. The response began at the back and moved forward. Not applause in the celebratory sense, but something more like a collective exhale, a release of 2 days' worth of accumulated tension, people responding from something deeper than trained professional reaction. Cross pressed his clasped hands to his mouth. Carlos looked at the ceiling. Elena Cross sat with tears running quietly down her face and made no move to wipe them, because this was not the kind of moment you wiped away. 2 weeks later, the independent review panel convened its first public session on a Tuesday morning, and Dale Brennan was the third witness called. He walked to the table in a dark suit without his union representative, who had resigned from his case 4 days earlier. He sat down. He adjusted the microphone. He looked at the panel members, 7 people, 4 of whom were law enforcement professionals, 3 of whom were civilians, including a retired federal judge and a hospital administrator. He said, I want to begin by stating clearly that I made a decision on that highway that was shaped by a bias I did not examine and should have. I am going to describe that decision and that bias in as much detail as I can, because I believe that is the most useful thing I can offer this process. And then he told them everything. He told them about the decision he had made before he reached Maya's window. He told them about the phone call he had ended. He told them about the medication label he had read while the phone rang in the car. He told them about the moment, which he now understood as the center of the whole terrible night, when he had heard the chief of cardiology of a major hospital on the line and had said, with a certainty that he now could not explain except as the product of something he had been carrying for a very long time, I don't know who this woman is. He told them all of it, every undefended, uncomfortable, real word of it. In the gallery, Lieutenant Morrow sat with her recorder off and her notepad closed, watching a man dismantle his own defense with the particular deliberateness of someone who has decided that the truth is the only thing left worth protecting. Across town, in her office at Riverside General, Maya Hartwell was in surgery. She had been in surgery for 2 hours and would be for another 3. A 67-year-old man named Arthur Gill, a retired school teacher, was on the table with a blocked artery and a wife in the waiting room, and a son who had driven 6 hours from Pennsylvania to be there. Maya's hands were steady. Her focus was absolute. The room around her was quiet and purposeful and alive with the work. She did not know yet what Brennan was saying in that hearing room across town. She would read it later, in the attending lounge, with her coffee finally warm for once, and she would sit with it for a long time without speaking. She would feel the complexity of it, the inadequacy of it against everything it had cost, and also the reality of it, a man at a table telling the truth about himself, and what that might build if the right people heard it and decided to do something with what they heard. She would think about Elena Cross, who had come to find her 2 days after the press conference and stood in her office doorway and said simply, "I know I can never give back what was taken from you that night, but I want you to know that I am going to spend whatever time I have, and because of you, it seems I have quite a bit of it, making sure this mattered. Not just as a story, as a change." She would think about what Arthur Gill's wife would say in the waiting room when the surgeon came through the doors with good news. She would think about the 47 missed calls and the cold coffee and the way the highway looked at 12 minutes past midnight, stretching out ahead of her in the dark. She would think about all of it, but later. Right now she was operating. Arthur Gill's heart was open under her hands, and she was focused entirely on the work of keeping it beating, which was the work she had been called to do and the work she would never stop doing, because that was who Maya Hartwell was. Not the woman in the viral video, not the subject of a hearing, not a symbol of anything larger than herself, but a surgeon standing at a table, doing what she had always done, holding life in her hands, refusing to let go.